Leesburg Center for the Arts, and we're inviting folks from all over the community to come tell us what do they need and what do they envision for downtown Leesburg. Downtown Leesburg, as you know, has an awesome history, beautiful buildings, really the bones of a great community. And we see that we've already done some initial walking around and talking to people, and we see that Leesburg is an awesome destination, a great part of the community. And we're really looking ahead. What's the future of Leesburg, downtown Leesburg? And we're asking the community tonight to give some input. Tell us what they envision. Tell us what they need Leesburg, downtown Leesburg, to become. We have a number of stations here at the Center for the Arts, and each station is designed to ask a different question. And we basically are here to take notes, to listen, to really gain insight about what people need and aspire for downtown Leesburg. Tonight is an important step in determining what the ultimate goal is, because without the public input, without understanding what people really are desiring, we're not really ready to have a goal. So we rely on the foundation of what people in the community are saying that they need and that they envision. That really forms the foundation of what becomes our guiding principles, if you will. But ultimately, we are looking to publish what's called a master plan. And a master plan is a combination of visuals that illustrate a future for this community, but also the roadmap and the steps that we can take. Some of them are low-hanging fruit. Maybe it's a little bit of paint and lighting can go a long way. But then some of them are really big steps the community can take to achieve to achieve the vision laid out by the people of Leesburg.
Good evening, everybody. Hey, there's a couple chairs here if you want to fill in, but other than that, we'll go ahead and get started. So on behalf of the City Commission, I think most everybody knows each other here, but I'm Al Minner, Leesburg City Manager. It's really great to see this many folks and get this kind of input. A few years ago, we embarked on a charrette for Venetian Gardens, and we've almost accomplished those goals. And as we've come to the end of that process, the next big goal I think the City Commission has is to focus on our downtown, which is, I think everybody will agree, the core of Leesburg, which for Commissioner Christian and everybody else extends beyond Canal. So remember that. That's an important part of the process too. So first I wanted to tip my hat to the Commission, who it's always, they always take a lot of heat for spending money. And master planning is one of those things that I think is important in the process. Make sure everybody's on the same page. Make sure the commission's goals line up with the community's goals and the business people. So this is a really important process. We went on a little bit of an RFP to recruit GIA Consulting. GIA's worked with the city a number of times on a couple of different projects. They've helped us out on the 44127 project, the downtown project. They've worked with us on the Dixie Landscape project, which was out to bid, and the construction contract will be before the city in a little bit. They know us pretty well. They've been very successful in Claremont. They helped Claremont put together a great master plan for their lakefront area. So when we went out, myself, Deputy City Manager Mike Rankin, and Public Works Director DC, to bring in a group that the commission approved, we were excited that GIA is part of that team. So hopefully you've noticed some of the things here tonight. I'm going to turn it over to Blake Drury with GIA, and Blake's going to give you kind of the details and the instructions on this evening. So we really look forward to getting a lot of input and then putting all of that into an action plan. So thanks for coming.
Thanks, Al. As he said, I'm Blake Drury with GAI Community Solutions Group. And are we going to do the light? Thank you. And we are the folks who are charged with helping to work through a master planning process to get to a downtown plan. We'll talk about the geography of that in a second. Kind of a big picture view of it. There's a few steps to it. what we call understanding, and this is a big part of what tonight is trying to learn from you all who know downtown best all the things that we need to know before we embark on a plan. So we like to listen before we draw anything, and part of that listening is actually trying to be in some active conversations with you. So it's really, really important that you participate tonight in the different activities that we've got going on. I know that when you came in, some folks got a head start on it. I appreciate that, but we've got plenty of time for everybody to jump in. We promised, I think, to keep it fun and exciting, so we're trying to do that. That understanding phase goes sort of May to July. That's where we're doing our homework, starting to try to understand what the big sort of themes and ideas for downtown might be. And since Al did bring up the fact that, you know, we do this for our living, dealing with small, medium, large downtowns throughout the state, that's a core part of our business. It doesn't mean that you're going to get the Claremont master plan and that we're going to go on to the next city and give them the Leesburg master plan. Every city is vastly different. There's some big trends that are going on, and we are going to talk about some of those tonight, but every city has its own DNA, has its own sort of intrinsic things that make it special. Starting this process off, we're trying to figure out what those things are. So that's the understanding part. We're going to do a second workshop sometime sort of late July, early August, that we call the exploring phase, where after we've listened and learned, we're going to start to set out some ideas and test those ideas with you. And the point of doing it then is that before any of those ideas get fixed in stone, where they can't be changed, where you look at it and go, gosh, there's no way we can go back on that. When those ideas are fresh, when they can still be changed, when they can still be improved on by lots of folks being involved in the process, that's what we want to do in that workshop. So that's another chance for you all to have to play a big role in helping us develop this plan. We're going to work on refining those ideas out of that workshop through September, and then sort of putting the plan together, what we call compiling and validating the plan, and heading toward the end of the year for a plan. So the second part of this presentation, Pete Seckler, who's one of the vice presidents with GAI, is going to talk about kind of what's in the plan. We sort of break things up into physical infrastructure, so things that someone might build, be they plazas or streetscapes or new buildings. So infrastructure, we think about two things like policies. So there may be policies that need to be changed, or new policies that may be needed that help downtown grow and help downtown kind of achieve that next level of improvement. And then in terms of infrastructure and policy, we also talk about programs. One of the interesting things about Leesburg is you've got the Downtown Partnership that does a lot of programming. How can we sort of leverage that and figure out ways to help those things continue to grow, things to complement those programs? So those, this is not just a plan that is going to deal with things that somebody might build. It's a broader spectrum than that. And our goal is to deliver that plan in December. One of the things that lots of downtowns are kind of dealing with, and Leesburg is to some extent too, is this idea that downtown used to be the place for work, right? This probably isn't Leesburg, but Leesburg may not have looked too much different from this at one point. This actually is Leesburg. This is Main Street. And downtown was the place for work. It was largely the place for business. It was the place to office. It was the place to shop. And one of the trends that's happened, not only years ago as businesses and retail sort of left and went in different directions, went toward where more people lived. This idea now that, any one of us, where's my shopping device, from our phone can order something and tomorrow it can get delivered, that fundamentally changes the way that retail happens and that downtowns react to that. So the places that have been successful when we're talking about small and medium-sized downtowns, which Leesburg is, are places that have made this transition from places of work to places of leisure. And leisure doesn't mean that you've only got recreation stuff downtown, but it means that your retail is probably more specialized. It means that you probably have things like restaurants rather than a heavy office influence. You probably have some residential. And that's one of the things that I think is starting to brew here in Leesburg, and we want to talk about how to capture that trend and continue it. Is how do you get more people to downtown to stay more often? One of those ways is to get more people living downtown. That brings its own set of challenges, but I think those are things that we want to talk about how those might be leveraged in a plan. And finally, those places get supported by infrastructure that, focuses on people. It's infrastructure that focuses on the comfort of folks as they come into these spaces. And they're places that are really built to provide an experience. So in this time of commodities where I can buy something and have it delivered here, what I need to have face-to-face is an experience with someone else. And those are the reasons why people would go downtown. And so Leesburg actually is kind of ahead of that game a little bit. If you look at the sort of lineup of the businesses that happen out here on Main Street, it really is things that are a little more service and leisure oriented. What do we do with this extra time that we have? So that's a place that I think we can start to build on. In sort of a bigger picture, downtowns that are successful are places that, as I said, create that place for experiences. They are places that celebrate arts and culture, this being one of those spots. Experiences that you can't get other places, that you need to have to be downtown to get. It happens on foot, it happens at the scale of the pedestrian. It links to the environment, so how we connect to the lakes, for instance, becomes an important part of the plan, and it's better connected to the broader city. So as we think about kind of the geography of, I hope I can move. As we think about the geography of the plan, looking all the way to the east and thinking about, as someone starts to enter downtown, what's that experience like for them? How do they get there? What's the first thing they see? What is the public infrastructure like as they move through that part of the community? How are all parts of the community building and supporting this place? How do all the residential neighborhoods build and support the core commercial and experience things that happen on this street and on the next street and on the next? How do we leverage things like the hospital and the energy that brings to downtown in so many parts of the day, the employees that brings to downtown? How do we get them out of this bubble and up here to do all the things that we think can be great that happen here? How do we, as Al talked about Venetian Gardens and the investment that the city's made there, how do we get someone to maybe come here to go to the park and come up here to have lunch? How safe and easy is it to make that access? How many times would you do that before you got bored with it? How do we make downtown a place that can continue to live on and on and on? There are parts of those experiences that we need to focus on at a very small scale, but looking, all the way from 441 to Dixie 44 and 27 on the west, what's the experience like for everyone in this place? If we focus in a little bit more, I think we're sort of right there now. If we focus in on how kind of the core of Main Street works, Leesburg's really interesting because you go to lots of downtowns throughout the state or the region and you realize the intact portion of Main Street in Leesburg is really long. Most places would kill to have, 3/4 of a mile of intact storefront. And the story here is, how do we start to build off of that and create that sort of Main Street experience extending through lots of other places? All the interesting scale and feel of Main Street, can that happen other places? Can we sort of turn the corner in places? Can Magnolia or Market be leveraged into different sorts of spaces that might create sort of a depth of experience so that you're not sort of a one-trick pony along Main Street? How do we create more depth to it? No, you're right on time. So tonight, the idea, Joe, if we could turn the light on real quick. I'll let everybody's eyes adjust, mine included. And we're gonna kill the lights again when Pete starts talking, and I promise you'll go to sleep at that point, maybe 2 slides into it. So when you came in, and I can't stress enough how important it is for everybody to participate in the different stations. When you came in, hopefully everybody got one of these sheets. This is the one that says teenager. I saw 1 or 2 people grab this. There's lots of retirees and business owners and other things that sort of describe you. That's less important than the sentence that's on the front. We'd really like you to fill this out at some point during the evening. There's a fishbowl on the sign-in table as you are headed out. Drop it in there. The backside is a little map of the different things that we've got going on at each table that we think is important for you to participate in. One of those is something that looks like, has anybody used the TripAdvisor website? All right, so you're going someplace new. I'm going to Asheville, North Carolina this weekend. I wanted to find a place to eat. I went on TripAdvisor to look for it. So we've created our own TripAdvisor so you can tell us, all right, what are the places that we need to understand are important to you all in the community? It's not just eating and drinking. It might be culture and other special places. Fill that out, stick it on there so that we can start to understand through your eyes a little more what makes Leesburg tick. Another really important one, we debated whether we should really call it Blackjack, but we called it Blackjack. So we have a dealer. Wes is our dealer, I believe. And we've got some cards. And this 5 of Sandhill Crane, I think it is, says, you're designing a downtown Leesburg postcard. What picture would you feature? There's a whole series of these. We'll keep it fun to get the questions moving. But the idea is not only for you to tell us information, but for you all to hear what your friends and neighbors are talking about, so that maybe you can fill that in. Wes will be taking notes as we do this. And then the one that I think people have already started to do is we've got a few blocks of Main Street over on the wall. We would have had more streets, but we didn't have enough paper to print all the other streets in downtown. We've got stickers that say, I wish this was. And the idea is, everybody has at some point been walking down the street or driving down the street and said, gosh, I wish that place was a taco joint. Now's your chance to write that and stick it on there so that, we can start to have some inspiration about kind of what you all think and what sort of makes you tick. I saw one up there that says, I wish this was a nightclub. Before tonight, I never would have put Leesburg and nightclub together. So That's the sort of information that we're gathering. We're trying to keep it fun, but this really is important information for us to have to start to build the plan. So without anything else, I want to turn it over to Pete Seckler. Pete runs our Community Solutions Group and really has a depth of experience in working with small downtowns throughout the state. He's going to share some things that we've learned from some other places, hopefully as inspiration to y'all as you start to work through this tonight. So thank you.
Okay, can we do the lights again? Well, this will be fun. How long can I keep you before you fall asleep? Blake said 2 minutes. 2 slides. This is great. And one of my main jobs for tonight was to bring the clicker and the laser pointer, and I didn't do that. And so Blake and I are trying to like click slides. We really, really enjoy character towns, what we call character towns. You know, most of America lives in small towns. And I think one of the last bastions of true democracy is found on city councils and volunteers like you have here with your partnership and your Main Street programs and other things that are going on here. Small town business owners, private business owners, and folks that live in neighborhoods that use those businesses. You know, I know for me where I live, I mean, I live on a brick street in a bungalow house, and it's not the weekend until I've been to Ace Hardware, and everybody there knows me. And you know, to me, community life is really what the world is all about. And so for us, we have a lot of passion about enhancing and helping communities determine their own direction in a sustainable future that is prosperous, both financially, but also prosperous, you know, spiritually, emotionally, you know, so that the quality of life that you have here can continue forward for future generations. One of the things that we say about character towns and character places is they're full of, they're towns that are full of characters. So I imagine everybody in this room probably knows each other, right? Almost. Probably many of you do. Some of you don't. Okay, all right. I know some of you do. Small towns are places that are usually very well connected socially. And it's important for us that during this process, we build more social connectivity between not just the business owners that are next door to each other, but between the neighborhoods and the downtowns and business entities and you know, different elements of how your community really function, so that you all have sort of a better understanding and appreciation for one another and how you can move forward together as a community. So what we are really interested in is enhancing communities in ways that are responsive and authentic and sustainable to the local places that we work. And as Blake said, every community is different. And you know, you need to sort of understand the businesses and where people are. And people usually want to see for themselves, you know, whether or not something will work. And that's the space that we really like to be in. There's a bunch of us that are here. So Frank Bellamo is here. Frank's worked in Leesburg before. Molly Stahl, Wes Schaefer, and you know Blake. And there will be a bunch of us over the course of time that will be interacting with you. Go ahead. Now, one of the things that I wanted to kind of share with you is that these public meetings can seem a little tedious, and there will be points in this process where it might seem a little tedious, like does anything really come out of a public meeting? And what I'm here to tell you is I'm now 51 years old, and sadly I'm old enough that I actually have a few cities where I can say I was there when. So what I want to show you is just a couple of things just to help you understand the concept of change, and that change and evolution based on the character and values that are important to you is achievable, and it is achievable here. And it really comes down to the momentum that you want to build as a community and what you want to pull together on and get done. This is Winter Garden in 1995. I was there. The town was practically out of business. They didn't want the West Orange Trail to come in. You know, very, very animated community discussions about the future of Winter Garden. Go ahead. And many of you know Winter Garden today. It's a different kind of a place, But many of the core sort of characteristics of small town life and character-based neighborhoods and places that are stable for families, for people in all stations in life, have grown well in Winter Garden. So there's a way of accommodating change without changing who you are, and I think that's an important idea. Sanford was another town. This was one of the first master planning assignments that I ever got. This is in like '99, where I really kind of had the reins. And Sanford was functionally out of business. And to make matters worse, the one really stable business that they had, which was the county courthouse, was preparing to leave and move south to an area called Five Points in Seminole County. So all those lawyers and all those reasons that you might have to go to the courthouse to pay a bill or deal with an issue or whatever it is, that kind of evaporated. Same deal. We went through a planning process. We tried to understand the values and the assets of the community. And they set a direction, and they've been working away at it. They've been doing what we call doing your knitting. And their community leaders have moved that community to a place where they actually have 2 functioning downtown theaters, like stage theater, not movie theaters, actual people on stage, and all sorts of other really interesting things that are going on in their downtown. And what's happening is that there's a response from the neighborhoods, and there's been tremendous neighborhood stabilization and upward mobility for the folks that live in and around the downtown. This is Eustis. Now, the reason I wanted to point Eustis out is that sometimes there will be community discussions. There may be community discussion as part of this project about something that may look to be radical change. So in Eustis, and this is easy because you can get your head around it because it's physical. Eustis had a very sort of strange configuration of one-way streets in their downtown with angled parking. And they thought they were doing that because they thought it made it easier to get into their downtown, and they thought the angled parking was good because it gave them a few more parking spaces in front of each store. But the fact of the matter is that it just did not function well for retailing at all. And we had a lot of conversations about this. And if you go to the next slide, we actually ended up two-waying the road, bricking it, completely rebuilding it, putting some business development incentives in place, and also starting to recruit some infill residential and some live-work kind of stuff. And again, Leesburg today, Eustis today is a very different place. And so I'm not saying that, we have any particular ideas about recommendations in Leesburg at this point in time, but during the course of this project, there will probably be some things where we may talk about, fundamentally repositioning something, and that will create controversy, and we'll discuss that and debate that. And then, ultimately over the course of the project, we'll come to some arrival point. But I don't want us to be afraid to talk about things that maybe turn things on their side and look at it in a different way, because we've been there and done that in cities large and small. And, we shouldn't be afraid. We shouldn't dismiss a big idea because we're afraid. If we dismiss it because it doesn't make any sense, that's a different thing. But we should be open to ideas, and I think any big ideas that you guys have here tonight and going forward, it's important to hear those. And we can vet out later on how well they work, but we should not foreclose an idea because it seems too out of the box. We've worked in places like Winter Park, so we understand that. We've done a lot of work in Lakeland, if you go to the next slide. So we've worked in a lot of these different places, and if you go to this one, there's a whole list of them just in the last 4 or 5 years. So we've been to a lot of places. We've seen a lot of things. We've seen, as Blake said, we've seen some trends that work. We've seen some trends that generally sort of don't work. But we don't like to apply our value set necessarily until we've kind of heard the question and heard where people kind of are in their own minds about their community. We know that we're going to get a chance to weigh in on some design or planning recommendations, but if we don't really hear the question first, then we're not really going to know what problem we're trying to solve. We have a bunch of folks. We have a lot of resources in our group. So as I said, you'll be seeing a bunch of these people. Go ahead. One of the things about, I want to just take a couple of minutes and then I'll wrap up. I want to talk about city planning just for a minute, because it's very easy for us to get into things that seem very complicated or esoteric. That's a big word. But you see a lot of these planning maps, and it's like, what does that really mean? And it doesn't mean much to me. The way that we think about community yes, it is reflected and recorded in these kind of difficult documents. But what it really is about, if you look at the colors like red, yellow, blue, whatever, it's really about how your community comes together. And I think everyone can understand this drawing, right? I mean, this is a courthouse square, and this is your town center, and this looks like a place of worship. This is a park. We understand streets. We understand a lake. So it's really about how the fundamental components of community come together to make a place. And so when you think about Leesburg tonight, and when you think about it over the course of the project, for all those land use plans that have all those colors on them and they seem so difficult to understand, think about your community in more simple terms. There's really only about 6 things. There's civic buildings, like City Hall or the library, or civic uses like the hospital. There's places where people live, right? There's places where you work or shop. There's how do you get around, which I want to be careful not to just say streets, because streets just implies cars. I think circulation and everything from streets to trails to sidewalks to transit. There's parks and open space where you can recreate, and then there's the natural environment. And if you really think about your city, that's really all there is those 6 things. And what we're going to talk about over the course of this project is how they're arranged, how they're connected, what they look like, and how they relate to each other. Are the neighborhoods relating well to the retail? How do things relate to different uses to make a holistic idea about community? Go ahead. So for us, it's always fun when we come to a town because, we have our little model in our mind of our 6 things. And for those of you that remember the game Tetris, it's about figuring out where those things are, because they're never arranged the way they are in the planning, in planning school, which is like the drawing on the left. They're always arranged in some interesting way, and we have to go sort of discover where that stuff is and how those pieces work. So if you go to the next slide, we'll go into a town and we'll try to understand it through your eyes. And so again, that's what we need to be doing tonight and going forward. And you're going to see us in some of your, we're going to be in your restaurants. We'll be walking around the neighborhoods, measuring things, looking at things. You can find residential, you can find parks, you can find civic buildings, you can find circulation patterns. You can find, how kids get back and forth to school. You just have to go look for them and untangle the code. And so we're going to be doing that. And as you think about the future of Leesburg, I would invite you to do that. Just think about those 6 things and where are they and how do they work? So what that leads us to is if we can go through that process, then we can get to a place where we really can try to unpeel the values and character about Leesburg that are important to you, both things that are aspirational to you for the future, but also things that bother you or that you wish were different. And it's very hard to get to this in a single question. So one of the reasons why we do these different types of exercises is there are different ways of sort of getting to an underlying thing that you might have in your mind or in your heart about what you aspire for Leesburg. If we can play these little games, and you start to give us answers, and we read everything, and we start to see the patterns of things that are really important to people. So that's why we do these meetings as we go forward. Another little model I want you to think about is we talk a lot about sort of just a model of sustainable places, which means that we have the physical environment, we have the social environment, which deals with community equity, but also political stability. And then we have the economic environment. How are you economically viable? How do you spend your money? How will you fund things or finance things? So we need plans that relate to all 3 of these things. So sometimes we'll talk about triple bottom line solutions. So we'll deal with things that are about sort of the urban characteristics or rural characteristics that you have, but then there needs to be a relationship to jobs and income and how are you going to pay for things, and how does this help the quality of life as well as the quality of interaction of your community. So that's kind of how we look at the world. And ultimately it becomes about alignment. So if there's one thing to walk out of here with tonight when this is over, is that this master planning process over the next 7 or 8 months is going to be about finding a handful of key strategic things that the majority of you are concerned with and figuring out how to get alignment so that we can get something done. Because if we don't have our vision articulated and some policy things and some economic things and where are we going to spend money on infrastructure and where are we going to deal with land development code or deal with a social issue or whatever it is, if we don't have those things aligned, we're not going to get anything done. So that's really the purpose of the plan. So another purpose of the plan is about, I mentioned earlier, building social connection for enhanced idea about your shared community and the downtown region and the close-in neighborhoods adjacent to your downtown. That is what everybody shares. Otherwise, go live in the suburbs, or go live, away. The people that are in Leesburg or doing business in Leesburg are here because of the relationship and connectivity to each other. So we want to enhance that. We want to define opportunities and vision and be able to articulate those in a way that people can understand them, which usually means drawings. Go ahead. And then just click through these. And then finally, we want to get to something that gives, click a couple more. Keep going. There you go. We want to get to a place where we can actually rationalize a whole set of things that you want to accomplish, whether it's things that have to do with recreational opportunities or schools or jobs or roads or how people get around. We want to have something that can direct the future regarding those things. So the way that we do that is we'll develop an urban framework plan. We'll have some character vision areas where we really zoom in. We'll have some ideas about economic development and how to fiscally implement the things that you want to do. And then we'll have some kind of an action plan. And so we'll have drawings, we'll have urban design drawings, we'll have sketches, we'll have diagrams, we'll have lists of things, all working together in a plan. Now, the last couple of slides, and then you can wake up, is just understanding, again, a couple more points about the way that we work. One is that we really believe in consensus-based planning. And there's a model of planning that 2 or 3 of us come to Leesburg and we spend some time and we cook up our giant idea about how to make everything utopia here. And we lay it on everybody and nobody gets it. And then, we have to go back to the drawing board. And that's just not productive. So the way that we like to work is to actually start from a place that's saying that a lot of questions and a lot of things that are maybe unknown or I have a big idea, but I don't really know how to deal with it. Let's get that on the table, and then let's start to sort of talk about what we think it means. And then let's ask ourselves some more questions and sort of kick some ideas around and think about things together. And maybe there's some things that fly, maybe there's some things that don't. But over time, we get to a place where we have a common understanding of where we're headed, and we can achieve that alignment that we're looking for. So we work at all different levels. We have big meetings like this, and we'll have one-on-one, smaller group meetings. Go forward. And we will build an idea that says that you're going to give us input, and it's going to relate to a lot of actions, but there's a misconception that says we're just going to push the button and start. We're going to go right from this to that. And that's not really how these plans come together. The way they come together is by us taking all the input that you're giving us and taking that input and baking it into some strategic, what we call citizen-based themes. If there are some big guiding ideas that all the input seems to fit under 4 or 5 or 6 big strategic ideas, and we can use those strategic ideas to create frameworks for change. This is sort of a strategic or principles-based approach to planning, then that will drive the action. And hopefully when we start to develop these actions, one action might relate to multiple of your strategic ideas. And that's how cities get things done, and that's how we achieve alignment. So you'll see that during the course of the plan. So we have lots of examples of this where we develop, some big ideas, and then we develop things that are sort of baseline and things that are more transformative. Go forward. And then we work on, how to implement those ideas and who can do the implementing. Is it the public sector? Is it the private sector? Is there an institutional entity that can help implement something? We'll talk about, things that cost a lot of money and things that don't cost a lot of money. So there might be, small opportunities that are easy to do, things that are maybe a little bit more involved, and we can go after some grants or go after some other ways of funding things. And then there might be some large transformational things. And we can build a an idea about implementation over time by dealing with small things, a lot of small things early with maybe one or two significant things to get the ball moving. And then over time, we keep working away at the small things and then incrementally keep dealing with these transformative things. What will guide the plan, the value of the plan, will be the strategic framework. The 5 or 6 big thematic ideas, because the actions that we can identify today over time will potentially become irrelevant because there will be new information coming in. But 10 years from now, you can still look at your strategy and say, yes, this is relevant or this is not relevant because it aligns with the strategy that we said was core to our plan. So if you go to the last slide, well, I'll just click you through Claremont really fast. So we did this in Claremont. Go ahead. We understood the history of Claremont. We understand how Claremont had grown over just a very short period of time. We defined the relationship of downtown to the region. We talked about the economic and the physical potentials. We developed themes and how those themes lay out to actions. We then drew that in terms of physical form. We developed some strategic things that were sort of some big ideas about how to move certain activities from one part of town to another. We reimagined the waterfront, and we have done a couple of transformative initial projects. So they've done a lot of small things, but they've done 1 or 2 transformative big things early to fundamentally reposition real estate and also create an environmental enhancement as well as a social enhancement to their downtown. And as a result, they are really, really cooking in Claremont right now with new investment, with new businesses, with residential that wants to come in, with neighborhood stabilization, with all sorts of things happening across all those 6 land use categories that I described. That's all happening very dynamically right now in Claremont. It's happened in lots of other places, and it can definitely happen here. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Blake, and we'll talk through these exercises, and we really want you to be active tonight. Okay? Great.
So if we can get the lights back on. I appreciate everybody's time. A lot of this might seem like drinking from a fire hose because it's a lot of information, but bear with us and please participate in all of these things. If you want to talk to one of us, feel free to pull us aside. Make sure on the way out to drop this in the bowl. Thank you.
In addition to tonight, we'll be hosting other workshops, and really, the next time you see us, we're going to take what we learned tonight, and we're going to synthesize that into what we call guiding principles. And we'll come back to the community and do this event again to say, hey, are we on the right track? Is this really what you're saying when it comes to the future of Leesburg? And from that, we hope to actually design a master plan that really aligns with that vision.
What is the master plan design? Is it a 5-year plan or 10-year? Do you have any?
Typically, it's at minimum 10 years, but it's healthy to do this on sort of a continuous basis, to keep the public engaged, to keep asking the questions about where this community is going and how we can get to where we want to go. But typically it's a 10-year minimum sort of look into the future.
I'm really excited about this evening. There's a ton of people here, a lot of business folks, a lot of people who do a lot of things in community. And the most important thing from this is that there's public buy-in and participation, because it needs to be that community plan where everybody's invested in it and they want to see it develop. So I think tonight was a great start on that. I think we got lots of great ideas and concepts, not too different than what we've talked about. So it'll be great to see the process unfold, and I hope everybody gets invested in it. And then the best part about it will be seeing the plan come to fruition. So I think tonight was a great start.
Hello, I'm Mike Peterson, City Commissioner, the newest City Commissioner. Been on the commission 5 months. I think it was a great meeting tonight. I thought it was well run, well organized. Great to see so many people out. Our downtown has always been going the right direction, and I just think it's great to have a vision, a plan, and keep it going the right direction. So it's good for Leesburg.
Well, I mean, I think it's a great first start. Obviously, Community Solutions has a lot of experience with this, from major metropolitan areas down to hometowns like ours. And so, they bring to the table step one, and the first step is to obviously get the community together to start getting their ideas so we can lay some foundation for the path we're going to take.
Hi, I'm Myron Leggett with Myron Leggett Studio, Photography Studio, downtown Leesburg. And my thoughts and my take on what's happening tonight, I think they may have some good ideas on how to get started. I told one of the gentlemen that I feel we need to figure out the best way to get customers here that'll spend money. And that's the number one goal that I think we need. And then, in my opinion, more businesses will come. Because if the customers are there, it's going to attract more businesses. And I said we need to try to figure out how to draw the villages. We get customers from there, but there's more customers and there's more growth that's coming closer to downtown Leesburg from the villages. So I think we can pull a lot of those people who have the time and the money to come downtown.
Hi, I'm Cheryl Bloom, and I own Bloom's Baking House and Restaurant in Leesburg, and right on Main Street. And I'm very excited about all of the changes that are going to be happening and taking place. I like the fact that they're asking the business owners and the shopkeepers and everybody downtown, the merchants, their ideas first, instead of coming in and saying we're all going to do it this way. So I think it's really cool. I think it's going to be really nice. My idea of Leesburg, I would love to have a slogan of "Come home to Leesburg." I think Leesburg already has a so unique history, and I think building on that and having that grow and having people come just feel like they've stepped back into time and that they're warm and wanted and welcomed. I think that's what Leesburg's about.
If you're watching this and you want to participate and get involved, reach out to the city of Leesburg, reach out to the Main Street District. We would love to hear what your thoughts and opinions and vision is for this community. We weren't able to get you here tonight, but hopefully you can come to the next event. We'd love to see you there, and reach out to your city officials to make sure that you're in the fold or in the know for what's happening next.